All right, hello everybody and welcome to the, hang on one second, and welcome to the third and final installment of the Mentoring Excellence webinar series. My name is Katie Stinson and I'm going to go over just a few announcements that we have before getting started and then introduce our speakers and finally turn it over to them to present the trials and tribulations of graduate school. So today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the NRMN Career Development website, as well as to the NRMN YouTube channel. I'll post those links to both of those in the chat now. So give me just 1 second to do that. All right, there will be time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please post them into the Zoom Q&A feature. Today's webinar, The Trials and Tribulations of Graduate School, is presented by Drs. Antentor Hinton Jr., Haysetta Shuler, and Melanie McReynolds. Dr. Hinton is a Burroughs Wellcome Fund Postdoctoral Enrichment Scholar, EE-Just Postgraduate Fellow in Life Sciences, and Ford Foundation Fellow at the University of Iowa in the laboratory of Dr. E. Dale Abel. Dr. Hinton has mentored 39 graduate, medical, or undergraduate students and has been awarded 3 university-wide awards and an organizational mentorship award, the Iowa Center for Research by Undergraduates Distinguishing Mentoring Award, Center for Diversity and Enrichment Distinguished Educator Award, Diversity Catalyst Award, and an LSAMP Excellence in Mentoring Award. Dr. Shuler provides professional and academic services to biology and chemistry majors at Winston-Salem State University. Additionally, she is an instructor for WSSU's first year experience. With more than 15 years of experience in post-secondary education, she advocates for student success. Dr. Shuler's main area of focus is STEM internships, mentoring, and academic and professional development. Dr. Shuler serves as the advisor to the Pre-Physician Assistant Student Organization. She's the supervisor of federal work study students and a member of the National Society of Leadership and Success, the president of Citizens Budget Advisory Council of Winston-Salem, and the founder of Shuler Consultant LLC. Dr. McReynolds is an HHMI Hanna H Gray Postdoctoral Fellow and Burroughs Wellcome Fund PDEP awardee at Princeton University, where her research focuses on the intersection of metabolic decline and aging. Dr. McReynolds completed her PhD in biochemistry, microbiology, and molecular biology at the Pennsylvania State University. Melanie was recognized as a rising star on the Cell Press list of top 100 inspiring Black scientists in America and aims to inspire the next generation of scientists to trust that all things will work together for those who believe. Melanie is on the trajectory to establish her independent research group where her future lab will shed light on metabolic aging and disease. And now, without further ado, the trials and tribulations of graduate school. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 second while I get the presentation switched. All right, I think we're ready to go. Dr. Antentor, if you'll take it away.
All right, so good morning, well, good afternoon to everyone, or good morning if you're on the California coast, so the West Coast. So I just wanted to say this PowerPoint means so much to me. This is where I get my inspiration for telling my undergraduate students how to prepare for graduate school. So today, this will be a ode to being able to be prepared, know how to go through the struggles and how to come out on top. And then also being willing to be able to press in and have a champion's mindset when there are sometimes doubts about whether or not you'll finish or not. So could you go to the next slide, please? So in today's presentation, we'll cover several things. I have an oath at the beginning that I used to say in the mirror every day when I was struggling in graduate school, and it helped me to overcome. And so it's something that you can play back in the presentation for your amusement, and so that you can actually go through it and channel it and understand why we say that a champion's mindset is so important. And then each of us, I'll call on each one of us and we'll talk about just how did we get to graduate school in about 5 minutes. And then from there, we'll transition to be able to talk about how to renew your mindset and how to have a champion's mindset and not have a fixed mindset, but having a growth mindset. Then we'll talk about the structure of graduate school and then what graduate school allows for you to have and where you can see where there are certain checkpoints that you need to go through to get to the next step. Then we'll talk about the trials and tribulations of graduate school year one mostly, because those two are the key years to get through the hump. And then also we'll talk about what is necessary to get into graduate school and how to overcome when you have challenges. And at the end, if we have time, we'll actually say the beginning oath. But I don't want to spend too much time on the oath. It's just for you guys to replay when you're going back on YouTube. So next slide, please. So this is the creed that maybe you can actually write down and print out for yourself or sign it in your mind every day about how to be a champion, how to actually be able to be strong. And basically this is talking about having limits and overcoming your own limits and not comparing yourself to others, but looking at the humanity inside of yourself, growing and continuously sharpening yourself instead of worrying about how other individuals view you, but also pushing forward to do something great. So in your spare time, please read all the action creeds so that you can be more familiar with it. So next slide. Now the fun begins. Okay, how did I get to graduate school? Well, I'm gonna pass that off to Melanie first so that she can talk about her experience. Then we'll talk to Dr. Shuler about her experience, and then we'll actually get into the champion's mindset. So Dr. Melanie McReynolds, would you tell us about how you got to graduate school in just a couple of minutes, really quickly?
Yeah, my journey to graduate school was quite interesting. I like to say early exposure is key. So when I went to undergrad, I attended Alcorn State University in Mississippi, and it was a requirement for STEM majors to take advantage or, take the opportunities of performing summer research internships every summer. So, getting exposed to research through the summers, I realized that this was the one career that I really would enjoy doing. Like I saw the life of the graduate students and the postdocs, and really the challenge of answering and asking questions that really matter, to our communities, really gave me the insight that I wanted to pursue the PhD in biomedical research. And my undergrad had a program between Alcorn State and Penn State. And what I could have did any post-bac program, I could have went straight into grad school. But I saw Dr. Avery August at Alcorn sitting in our classes from the time of my junior year. And I saw his commitment and I wanted to I knew the PhD was supposed to be a lonely process, but I didn't want to do it by myself because it was hard enough. So I saw the commitment Penn State had with Alcorn students in the program. And I decided that, this was going to be the route for me. And I completed my master's between Alcorn State and Penn State. I didn't really worry about going to any other graduate school or any prep programs, although I did make a lot of connections and applied to many of those programs. My mindset was committed to Penn State at that time. And the rest is history, and I'll talk about it more later. But long story short, taking advantage of early of opportunities, resources, and making valuable connections, and using that discernment to see who would really be the best person or the best space for you. Dr. Shuler.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. That was a lovely story. My story is quite unique as well. I came from the business world and into undergraduate programs at Winston-Salem State University as one of the coordinators for a pre-college program called HCOP. It was during my work there that Dr. Alexander, who was the director of the program, she encouraged me to pursue my degree because I love to study the human mind. I enjoy looking at human behavior, want to know why people act the way they act, why they respond the way they do. And my belief is by understanding that I can make a change and help them to have the champion mindset. We worked with middle school, high school, and undergraduate students in our pre-college program. And at that time, I saw that there was a big need for improvement on working with students who had that inferior mindset into helping them to realize that they have all opportunities to pursue whatever health career they decide to. In order to do that and to be effective, I needed to go back to school. That wasn't a little thing for me, but I went and I pushed forward And as I continued to go into my first and second year in post-bac programs and graduate programs, it was so exciting. I had about 4 different projects going at one time. I had students here, students here, students here, and we finally came together and it became so exciting until we had several publications. We've done several talks and we still work together as a group, continuing to understand the mind, continuing to determine how we can make a significant contribution in not just research, but in the lives of people. So that is my story, and I'll pass it on to Dr. Hinton.
Thank you, Dr. Shuler and Dr. McReynolds. So my story just sums it up in just, quick couple words, because I'm very verbose. As my boss says, I suffer from verbosity. So clearly, I decided that I really enjoy science, and I discovered science for the first time with my grandparents, gardening. I didn't realize that science was just as simple as watching something grow and why, but I started to develop the curiosity. And so I carried that throughout, and my parents started to help me to get acclimated to high school and trying to take some honors courses to be able to get transitioning to college. And then when I got to college, I met Dr. Shuler and Dr. Clark, who helped me to be able to grow into the scientist that I am today, and actually plugged nice seeds about cell biology, plant biology, pharmacology, and psychology inside of me, and made me ask questions about who, what, when, where, and why. All things we need to know about the qualifying exam, which we will get to. And basically from there, the rest is history, because I was able to develop into a scientist that just would always question. But one of the key things that I took from everything that they've said was to be teachable and be humble always. And so no matter if you don't get anything else out of the talk today, be a champion by having a mindset of being humble, being thankful, and also always teachable, because these are the 3 things that you really need to have a PhD and master it. So let's get to it. So what is a champion's mindset? Well, Thomas Paine says, what we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is the dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. So the best part about this article is that when you are getting a PhD, you get accepted, you have the freedom to think how you want to. You learn how to critically think, how to be an analytical person. But the key thing is learning to have the freedom to explore your questions. So you want to have the curiosity, and the curiosity comes from a growth mindset. So what is a growth mindset? It's something that develops over time versus having a static mindset that is condensed down to a certain narrow view. So in a PhD, you want to have a very strong curiosity that never stops growing. And the reason for this is because if you don't continue to ask questions, you cannot continue to discover. And I also want to tell you this, at the bottom, it says, I want each of you to be able to assess the power inside of you to achieve a pleasant life and indubitable success we all look for in an educational plan. So what does that mean? Next slide. It means in order to have an educational plan, you have to have a story inside of you, a story that never dies. And a champion's mindset is actually explaining that story through the hands that were gifted to you, through the mind that was gifted to you to ask questions. And from that, you develop who you are, your trademark. Your trademark is also part of a champion mindset. Being able to carry yourself in a light that is going to be respectable during your PhD process, people will admire, people will gravitate towards and want to have conversations with you, because this is the basis of how you form collaborations. A friendly face and a kind heart and curiosity leads to collaborations. Closed mindset, not a closed heart and not a closed mind. Also, while we're developing our trademark, it is important to ask what type of scientist you want to be, and that helps to develop your identity. One interesting thing that Maya Angelou said, who is one of the best poets, I think, is first things to do is find out who you are and what you want in life. This is what I said, but her part is there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. So the reason I said what I said before is because you have to figure out in life, what is your purpose? And so if you believe your purpose is to be able to come with a drug that's going to help cure COVID, a drug that's going to help cure HIV, or a drug that's going to help cure hypertension, we all have to stick to it, no matter what's going on. Because in grad school, you have to have a champion's mindset. You have to put on your helmet and stick to it. Don't let things that are coming outside bother you and your thoughts and your thinking. You have to stay strong. And also, when we were preparing, Dr. Melanie McReynolds had some words about how to stay strong in the context of a champion's mindset. Go ahead, Dr. McReynolds.
Yeah, so there are basically 5 points, well, 6 now, because I want to piggyback off of something you said, Dr. Hinton. Remember, with the growth mindset, we don't grow where we're comfortable. A lot of times we want to be comfortable and we want to stay, consistent in the same mode. But when you're, on the path of discovery, those challenging experiments, those failed experiments in graduate school point you into the directions of where your science will really take off. So know that, when you're uncomfortable, that's really a good time. So enjoy that because you're moving to a next level. When you stagnate, something is wrong. All right, so 5 practical tactics for really overcoming the trials and tribulations of graduate school and really the foundation of what can build your champion mindset. First, I will always say, don't live nor go through graduate school for the approval of others. What you do in graduate school is for you, right? And all the things you're not doing it for your family. You're not doing it for people back home. Your parents, of course, they're going to be proud of you. You're not doing it for the approval of your haters. Of course, they're going to hate and continue to motivate you, but you're doing it for yourself. Secondly, you are not defined by your past. Always remember, it's not how you start, but how you finish. When I was starting in graduate school, I was a mute. I didn't say a word. I had a strong Southern accent, and I thought that everyone would think I was ignorant because I sounded so country. And I also had a speech impediment, but it's okay though, because it's not how I started, but how I finished. Sometimes you have to sit there, go through the process and allow the work you do to speak for you. The third part is we always have to remember that our work is not coupled to our accolades or to whatever anyone else's blessings or awards are. Our worth is defining who we are before we get into graduate school, and it only grows as we go through that process. And know that those accolades and those awards will come at the right timing. But your worth is not tied to what you get, your failed experiments, your rejected grants and awards, etc. Fourthly, we can't be led by our feelings or emotions through the graduate process because it is hard, but we really have to be led through our spirit of discernment and just in faith and believing that we are in graduate school for a reason. We're going to overcome soon and later, but if we led by feelings and emotions, we can sometimes make irrational decisions. And lastly, I would just say we cannot grow weary in well-doing. We have to know that in due season, those seeds that we planted throughout the graduate process, they're going to reap into a harvest. So pass it back to you, Dr. Hinton. Those are my 5 practical tactics for building your champion's mindset.
Thank you very much, Dr. McReynolds. Okay, so could you go to the next slide, please? So also a champion's mindset is actually having mentors to chisel your mind into the foundation that it needs to be able to withstand the trials and tribulations that come up in graduate school. And when we were talking earlier, we were talking about how mentors shape who you are and help create an image and identity for yourself and help you to express your story into words and actions. Dr. Shuler, could you explain a little bit more about words and actions and how mentors are able to help shape your champion's mindset?
Sure, and thank you. So as Melanie and AJ has both said, having that champion mindset means you have to discover, not only when it comes to research, but discovering who you are and discovering how to allow others to help shape your GPS, which is your roadmap to your success. And one thing about being a mentor, we only hear that one side of a mentor, meaning that person's going to have a mentee. However, there is a two-way street to this relationship. First, on the mentor side, it has to be intentional. What do I mean by that? That means that I am committed to helping this student to achieve his or her success to go to the next level. And that also requires I'm going to have to be comfortable and set with that person's strengths and weaknesses. I'm always focusing on the strengths because one of my beliefs is if I can keep your strength at a certain level, your weaknesses will come along. I'm going to show you your weaknesses, and I need you to be able to receive that feedback and take it and use it to build on it versus to, as Melanie said, use your emotions and think that I'm being harsh, I'm being terrible, I'm being rude, I'm being hateful. No, it's only to make you better. Another thing about being a mentor is that it is not just one time, it's a lifetime commitment to that individual. I have to say, as you probably already know, I was one of the mentors for Dr. Hinton, and that started in his undergraduate program. And here he is going into a faculty position, and he still considers me as one of his mentors. I too have more than one mentor. And I say that to all of you, just do not surround yourself with one person, but have a group of persons where you can bounce off ideas and get a good variety of feedback. And you have all this fruit in a basket. And now guess what? You're in the position to choose. I love the word options. Any student that works with me know that I believe in providing you with a lot of options. I have no problem with sharing the mentorship with someone else because there's always someone out there that knows more than you know, may know about more opportunities than you know. So you have to broaden that network with mentoring. And one thing, the last thing I would say about mentoring is that it has to have a good communication network. You cannot mentor someone with a closed mind that stays closed. At that point, it's up to me to recognize that, hey, I need to send this young person over to someone else because I am not getting through. I do not want to be the person that keeps a person in a stagnant mind when there's so much to discover. When you lose your point of discovery, you use your will to go forth and get your PhD. Dr. Hinton?
Thank you so very much. Next slide, please. So as we talk about mentors, I've had a variety of mentors, and I think that a lot of people, kind of laugh at me all the time about saying I have about 40 something mentors. Well, when we were preparing the PowerPoint, we started to laugh and realized that we all have a lot of mentors. And so Dr. Melanie McReynolds is actually going to share with you guys about how it's important to not only have mentors, but it's about how you pick your mentors. That's most important to continue to shape the ideologies that you have in your mind that's going to give you the best outcome for your science. Dr. Melanie McReynolds, will you talk about some of your mentors? This is just a few, every one of her mentors.
Yeah, when I think about mentors, I realize that mentors come in all shapes, forms, and sizes, right? You have mentors, people who will mold you, who will give you that critical love you need, as Dr. Shuler was just pointing at, but you can also have sponsors and also champions. So this is a really good mixture of people who have served as one or all three within my life. So as I mentioned, mentors sometimes are those people who mold you. For example, Wendy Hanna Rose, who is in a green shirt at the bottom center, she serves as my graduate school mentor who really took the time to mold me into a scientist and who the person I am now. She saw a few of my deficiencies at the beginning. I was a straight chemist, but I loved the biology of the bench. But I did not have that strong biology background, although I was a chemist and a physics all day long. But she took that time and she had that patience to really help me began to fill my biological gaps that I had, to really get an understanding to be the strongest biochemist possible. And that takes time and dedication and someone who's really invested in your career. My mama told me a long time ago, and I used this for picking my advisor in graduate school. It's not about who want you all the time, but sometimes it's about who won't. It's not always about who you want, but sometimes it's about who want you. The person who want you will always want you, but the person who you want may not always want you. So if you chase someone down in graduate school, like, hey, I want to be in your lab, I don't want to work with anybody else but you, and that person don't care or give anything about you, what type of mentor relationship would you have? And in graduate school, it's about making those discoveries, yes, but it's really about making it to the finish line and building that toolkit of skills to when you leave your PhD, you can go out and get whatever Nobel Prize you want. Another type of mentor is Dr. Rajna, who is besides Wendy, and he was a champion and a mentor and a sponsor for me from graduate school up until my PhD. He was the chair of the biology department at Alcorn. Dr. Rajna was a champion and a sponsor. He took 10 students to India every summer for over 15 years. And 85% of the students that went to India off his program are now PhDs, MDs, PharmDs, dentists, etc. But 85% of the people were able to pursue a professional degree. And him and his wife, they took 10 students from Mississippi, gave us that exposure. Sometimes that was a student's first time ever flying, first time ever going international and doing research and being exposed. And not only did he have that program to go to India, he also was the person behind the Bridges to the Doctorate program between Alcorn State and Penn State, between him and Dr. Avery August. And I was a sophomore junior, and Dr. Rajna looked me in my eyes and said, if anyone benefits from this program, you would benefit. You are one of the people that we built this program for. And, and I can say that, the fruit of that program have paid off. But he was a champion and a sponsor from the very beginning, thinking about students like me in our freshman and sophomore years and saying, I want to make sure these students are able to pursue science because I see it in them when no one else sees it. Josh Rabinowitz is my mentor now at Princeton. He gives me the freedom to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, and how I want to do it, but also give me the direction that I need to make sure I'm doing things correctly. And the people at the top row have been mentors, sponsors, and champions. Sometimes you just need people in your corner who are sprinkling your name in places when you never know they're talking about you, or people who will sit down with you once a year and shed light on you and give you the directions and needs so you can tackle 5 more years down the line. And the people who would just give you that science exposure when no one else will, etc. But those are I don't want to ramble too long. I'm gonna pass it back over to you, Dr. Hinton.
Next slide, and thank you, Dr. McReynolds. So how do you get a champion's mindset when you may not have a mentor, or you feel that you may not have a mentor? Well, the quickest way to do that is what's inside of a book. Sometimes you may find people on the television that you admire. One of the people that I admired growing up was Hill Harper. I felt that he never cussed on TV. He always kept himself in outstanding and utmost standing roles that would, show what an African-American man could accomplish. And he's very well accomplished. He has a master's degree and a JD, if I'm not mistaken. And so these are things that are very important. Another person growing up that I aspired to be like was Ben Carson when he was a neuroscientist. And so also, I enjoyed The Pact, where there were 3 doctors, dentists and medical doctors, that formed a friendship to get through. And from these books, I knew I needed friendships to get through grad school. I knew that I needed to find someone I could emulate in grad school. I may not have the person right away, but I know what I'm looking for. I know what I want to achieve. And then I knew something that could be accomplished. I knew that I could make a discovery, because that's what Ben Carson did with his surgeries. So these elements I found in books. So what I'm challenging you to do is start to fortify your mind. Critically think about new ways of discovering information. And one way to discover information is knowing how to be proactive. Next slide. Being proactive is allowing yourself to understand what it's like to come up with a plan beforehand, to be able to push through and encourage yourself when you don't have the courage to succeed. So one particular person that I love that's a great fighter in the ring and out of the ring is Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali said, "He who is not courageous enough takes risks will accomplish nothing in life." Science is always about costing. To giving some reward, you have to actually have a risk. So there are not any rewards without risk, but you can plan by being proactive. And that's the key to having a champion's mindset. Research. That is another reason why I said to start discovering to read. You may not have the mentor you want at the time, but you can read about how to do different things. Sometimes we have to plug into the system that's available to us, but we also can start seeking out through the National Research Mentoring Network, people that we emulate, and people that we want to emulate that may not be directly at our school. That is the benefit of being able to see how online can interface with different individuals. Another thing is learning how to speak positive words. You are in charge of what you can do. And if you constantly say, I can't do this, I can't do this, I'm not good, I'm not going to do well, you're being pessimistic. Be proactive. In when someone won't share mice with you or tell you that, oh, I don't want to help you in this experiment, it's okay. Keep your champion's mindset. You have to be the fighter that I know that you all can be. Next slide. Someone that I know that has been a fighter through all of her career is Serena Williams. Another fighter is Juan Martín del Potro. The reason I say that is because Juan Martín del Potro, he embodies who he is. He's proud of being a Christian. He's proud of being a homeman. He's proud of speaking Spanish. He's proud of all his identity. He's proud of being intellectual. He loves to read, but he keeps having this wrist injury. So his career keeps getting short and more and more and more shorter every time. But everyone in the tennis community wishes he could do better. So even when you have a challenge, you have to keep going till you reach your goal, because eventually he won a Grand Slam with a broken wrist. You know, that was not the best wrist. It was fixed, but it wasn't perfect. But he beat the top 2 players in the world that are now considered legends. Just think, although he may have had that one defining moment, he would have never reached it without having the champion's mindset to pursue when he was having difficulty with his wrist. Another anime show that I watch, I want you to learn that you can find the joy, the excitement in everything that you're doing. I watch anime, and I actually love to watch the humanity and mankind in anime. I watch how there's a struggle, there's a resolution, and then sometimes you have to power up to the next level. Well, a champion's mindset is learning that you can't be the same that you are yesterday or today. You have to prepare for tomorrow and the day after it. So that means that you have to keep focused, be proactive, and have resolve. The next slide. And then when you have resolve, you're able to overcome the hardships that are faced in grad school. You're also able to understand how to persevere, which is more or less really you need to have grit, not just perseverance. You have to know how to stay consistent and develop this personality trait to be able to really push in. And also, while you're reading, not only having a conversation with your mentors, but also reading, you'll develop better verbal and nonverbal communication cues. And lastly, if you stay strong with your champion's mindset, you just might be able to unlock your potential. But remember, talent is cheap. Like Stephen King says, it's really pressing in and having that hard work in order to overcome. Next slide. So since there are no questions in the chat box, we'll keep going. Next slide. Now we'll focus on the structure of graduate school. We'll split and talk about each thing. I'm going to talk about the summer before. Dr. Melanie McReynolds is going to start talking about the second year, and then Dr. Shuler is also going to talk about the first and second year as well. So I'll hand it over to them after I get done. So the summer before you've completed undergrad, you need to say high five, you need to celebrate, and you need to go take a little vacation. How you sometimes need to take a vacation is tying it to a conference. So then this way you can get some networking in and then get a couple of days after the conference to be able to do what you need to do, which is some R&R. So pick a conference so that you can continue to have a champion's mindset and renew your mind towards something that's greater and have some questions that can be answered for the next step. But you also want to take a break. So if you notice, I'm eating dinner with some people that I met at a conference, but I also spent some time by myself in nature. I love going to nature. I love seeing the beauty of what the universe can create, what God's created inside of me. You know, you don't have to believe in God. You can believe in the universe. It's okay. But for me, I like when I'm close to the water. I look at nature. I see how things are so beautiful and that there is peace in this world. So that lets me know that I need to go to the water to be at peace every time. So when there's something difficult going on, I can relax. And that is the state you want your champion's mindset to be in before you get into graduate school. Now, year 1 and year 2 are the most challenging years of your graduate school experience. Now, remember, this is the structure. We'll go into the details later, but I just want to tell you about the structure and what it's like to have classes, things like that. So Dr. Melanie McReynolds, could you talk about the classes and a little bit of the qualifying exam, then hand it over to Dr. Shuler, please?
Yeah, the first year is usually interesting because Along with the classes, usually the classes are general based off of the umbrella angle you taken in graduate school. For me, I was in B&B, so biochemistry, microbiology, molecular biology, and we had a core concepts class. And usually the core concepts covers everything from biochemistry to biophysics to microbiology, molecular biology, cell biology, everything else in between. And I see Dr. Hinton is nodding his head. He probably genetics. He probably had a course similar, to that. And it's really the time to tie up, all of the loose ends of what you're supposed to know before you go in graduate school. And the classes after that will all be research-based, paper-based, discussion-based. So that's the last time you'll get any physical information. It's all at a very high level, high speed way. You're supposed to learn in the undergrad, right? But on top of those classes, you're also doing your rotations. And your rotations, depending on your program, for me, it was 5 weeks. I know some people who had 8-week rotations, even 12 weeks. But it's your time to really spend in your laboratory of choice between various advisors, people you reach out to, people who reach out to you. But you really want to understand the dynamics of that lab, what is being expected. Ask yourself these questions. Do you want an advisor who is hands-on, have hands-off, or somewhere in between? Do you want an advisor who want to see you between 9 to 5? Someone who don't care when you come in, or someone who is down your back on your business on everything you do? And you can look at the dynamics of the graduate students and the postdocs in that lab. Are they happy? Is it messy? Are people miserable? Or do everyone keep their head down and work? And understand the environment that you would thrive in. So again, we touched on that, but you want to use your spirit of discernment when you're choosing a lab. But within that first year is really important because rotations are happening. Classes, you want to have your foundation and get that knowledge that you need. And also really participate in the modules and have an understanding and hands-on ability of what you're really tackling. And in your second year, you're still, like I mentioned, more of the paper-based, research discussion-based classes and any specifics. So say you join the immunology lab, you may take cell signaling, or you may take advanced immunology, etc. But you also will have your candidacy or your qualifying exam within that second year. And that's the time when it could be your PhD candidacy in some cases. And, are you able to do what you need to do to be a PhD candidate? So in my case, it consisted of, presenting a paper, writing a research overview of that paper I was presenting, writing a research overview of my proposal, like a proposal of my research of what I was proposing, and also doing a chalk talk on that. So it was a lot of juggling components, but are you able to really stand before this committee, answer any questions that are thrown, have a chalkboard before you? And just, it's your PhD candidacy, and everyone's candidacy is different. Some of my best friends, they had to write a grant and defend their grant and propose their grant proposal. So, it varies, but once you pass that niche, you're no longer a PhD student, you're a candidate. And it's like the one major hurdle to be towards the end of that process, but it's really in your beginning and it solidifies what you're going to do. Dr. Shuler?
Thank you, Dr. McReynolds. That was really nice. And she's covered a whole lot of what I was going to say, but I would go back to say, this is the time to be proactive. And it's also a time to you're not solo anymore. You're going to have to collaborate. This is also a time where you want to take responsibility for your academic success. What do I mean about that? You want to continue to have that mental transition, because now you're at the stage where, although you might have a supervisor committee, you're no longer being told what to do. You are now deciding on what to do. So it's like you're away from your parent. Your parent now is your supervisor committee or your PI, and they're going to give you a layout. You're going to know the syllabus. You're going to know what's expected of you. That's part of being proactive. You're going to find out about conferences you want to attend. That's going to help you grow you in your area of study. And you just don't want to go to any conference. You want to go to a conference, select a conference that's going to help you reach your end game. And then, as Dr. McReynolds and Dr. Hinton has said, Before you do one of those projects, you want to make sure you've gone through your supervisory committee, you've had mock interviews, you can say your project is like you're telling your story of your life. And when you see that there are flaws, this is the time to fix those flaws, because if you don't pass this exam, you're not going to go to the next step. So you want to keep yourself proactive throughout the entire stage. That means you're going to be proactive in knowing what is expected of you. When you come to that crossroad and you don't know, this is not the time to make an assumption. Go ask your supervisory committee or your PI a question. Do not, again, make assumptions. Although we're in the stage of discovery, this is not the time to assume anything, because you're wanting to go to that next level. And then, of course, once you make you're getting in that stage where you're preparing for your dissertation, you want to go over your study. You should know it back and forth. You should know what happens if this doesn't happen. You should be able to tell your theoretical framework. You should be able to have those theories in the back of your mind, not just going, well, I think this is what he said. No, you know this is what he said, and how you're using that information with this current information. But before you even get there, you want to make sure you stay on top of your trends on your topic of what you're researching. Because if you're researching something and it's not trending right now, it's not gonna be worth your time. So you want to keep up with those trends. How do you do that? Attending conferences, talking to your peers, getting to know your faculty, talking to faculty outside of your research lab. You have to be responsible for your academic success. This is not the time to act like a 2-year-old and have those little fits, because at the end of the day, after you've had your fit, you're going to have to go back and do what you should have done. So make it easy for yourself and always remain teachable. Back to you, Dr. Hinton.
Thank you. So next slide. So as Dr. Shuler said, you have to be responsible for your own academic success. Well, during year 3, before you think about taking your qualifying exam, or like Dr. Shuler may have said, yes, she said it, because Dr. McReynolds went over the qualifying exam. She had said also about your dissertation, because sometimes your only qualifying exam is actually your dissertation exam. So it depends on what type of PhD program you're going to. So during the 3rd year of graduate school, you want to be able to take your qualifying exam if you haven't taken it by your 2nd year because you had a delay with courses. But you also want to improve your own career development plan. You are the key to your success. So coming to seminars that we've done before, such as the Power of Saying No, are ones that Dr. Melanie McReynolds did with some of her friends, such as Radical Black Narratives of Becoming a Scientist. Sorry, I couldn't read it. And also, you have to think about, when you're not only thinking about career development training, but you have to think about grant writing, because grant writing gets you to the level where you need to be able to write a paper. So next slide. So as you're conducting research by year 4, you should be thinking about composing a paper. Dr. Melanie Reynolds and I, this is one of our many of papers that we have, and you want to at least have one first author in graduate school, but the idea is to have multiple. So you want to have more than one project going and a capstone project. So you have something that's going to be, really substantial, and it's going to be a publication, and 2 or 3 smaller projects that are, that may be a smaller publication, but at least gets you something, off the ground. But also during this stage, you should be thinking about, if you don't want to go into academic level postdocs, you should think about internships so that you can prepare yourself for industry. And then also maybe other careers that are out there, such as government or policy. So these things have to be discussed in an IDP plan early on with your PI, so he or she or they know what to do to help prepare you for the next step. Remember, graduate school, the primary focus is research. So I like to say, if you're going to do a career development plan, don't tell your PI for a while. You come up with all the data he or she or they want. Okay, and then you come up with enough for another paper, but you don't tell them. Okay, this is one of the keys to graduate school. You have enough data so that you can go off and do a little career development work, and then you can come right back in and you be like, okay, I had this data, and he or she or they be like, well, wow, okay, what's next? And you say, well, I thought about doing this, and they'll say, oh, okay, all right, and then you go off and do it and say, hey, I think I have a little bit of time. to do this. Remember, data, honors and awards, and publications are your currency. If you're doing well, your PI will be like, okay, well, they can continue to do what they're doing. Go ahead and keep going. So that's the key. Remember, data is currency, honors and awards are currency. You want to make your PI look great. Next slide. So now the key thing is the structure of the 5th year. Let's say you get lucky and you finish in 4 years, congratulations, because that doesn't happen often. But let's say sometimes if you get into the 5th year and you're about to actually graduate, you should know the finish line is coming along. You should be aware that you have to get everything in that you need at this moment, because as you transition to maybe becoming a postdoc, if you go through academia, it is where you're working all the time as a senior graduate student, meaning that you already know your projects that you're going to get. You just got to go in and get the data. There's no more time for career development training. There's no more time for trying to develop your niche. There's no more time for any of that. You have to know what it is that you're going to do, what skills you can take with you, what skills you're deficient at for your postdoc, and you have to leave 6 months to train before you get to your postdoc. That's another nugget that many people think about. Don't wait for them to train you. Go into your postdoc. It's going to slow you down, and you won't be able to generate data for fellowships before you get there. So make sure you're interviewing 9 months in advance before you leave, so that you know by 6 months where you're going, and then you can start to train on the techniques that you need. You can have meetings through Zoom or Blue Jeans with the staff to know what is expected, to know how to communicate with people. Like, for example, you also have to be able to know about hierarchies. So remember that every lab doesn't run as everyone's autonomous and can do what they want. Sometimes in bigger labs, if you go to the big lab to get the Nature Cell or Science paper in your postdoc, you have to learn how to work with other people. This is this champion mindset coming back in, knowing how to collaborate, know how to be proactive, know how to be resilient with different personality types, and knowing how to take direction when there is direction that's given. You know, for example, I had my head down. I was also shaking my head at the same time when Melanie was talking about genetics, because I agreed on that point. But I also was shaking my head because I was answering a text message from someone that's hierarchy, has a higher hierarchy level than I do. And the reason I say that is I might be an assistant professor at Vanderbilt, but while I'm in this lab, you have to be humble. You have to be teachable. You have to know how to respond. And that will also translate for every step, because there's always going to be someone that's your chair eventually when you have a lab of your own. You have to still stay humble and teachable at all costs. So get this through your mind now. Even if you decide that, oh, academia's not for me, I want to do a non-traditional postdoc and do something else, you will have a boss. So think about your papers, your career development plan, thinking about finding your niche, and thinking about that timeline so that you can plan everything out. Be proactive, because that's the only way that you're going to be successful. Dr. Melanie McReynolds, will you take over and talk about how you had success during your dissertation, and then go into the next slide and talk about the break that you had right before you went into doing your postdoc? Could you tell them about that? Thank you so much.
For me, success within my dissertation first came through community. Graduate, like I mentioned earlier, graduate school, they say the PhD process is supposed to be the loneliest process in your life. But I feel, we are better together. And sometimes it's better to have a community around you, especially community of like minds, scholars, people that may share similar experiences or just really understand the world. When you're going, sometimes when you're the only person that look like you in graduate school, it's pretty powerful to have every person in every program come together and just offer that support. And diversity brings unity amongst everyone. And a lot of time in these spaces, we could come together and we could vent. We could troubleshoot, we could get insight for experiments. We can say, hey, I'm dealing with this person, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And person B may be like, hey, I dealt with this as well. And you can't do M and N or P, but you can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it will work. There were times when some of us would go, when a person was getting ready to defend or going through a qualifying exam, etc., we'll throw oil on people's doors, on their PI doors, and pray, etc. And sometimes just coming together and doing that, it just gave you that little bit of faith to just believe, like, whoo, but sometimes you need people to pray with you and people to, you can cry on their shoulders, and they're like, girl, I went through that last week, but you see, I'm all right. And you're like, yep, So I say what helped me to be successful was that community community and my friends. But what was really good is when they all graduated before me. So I could really focus on my science and get them out the way and stop, being the center of the community and do nothing but science. But having the ability, you can't be a rabbit in the hole the entire time at work. You like Dr. Hinton mentions, it's good to take breaks. It's good to travel. It's good to also live life. A lot of times this is the better part of our 20s and our 30s, right? So enjoy life. A happy scientist produces the best science. If you're always stuck in a lab with no light, no windows, nothing from the outside, you're not going to produce anything. But if you're always traveling to every city and every party, you're not going to produce anything. So there's always a healthy balance. And you can go to the next slide. And with taking a break for me, I was able to I had a break over the summer. For me, it's really good about transitioning. You want to, I like to be done with one thing before moving on to another, and always take a slow transition to where I may have an apartment here in New Jersey, but I was still going back to State College. I had months to really clear my desk out at Penn State. My paper was done in May. The revisions, everything came out really nicely. In July, I was able to start. So I was really able to just slowly from one space to another. And even starting in July and August gave me a month to kind of transition into the McReynolds lab before August, September 1st, when, Josh was still there. We kind of talked about what we wanted to do. He went on his summer vacation. And then when the semester started and everybody was running, I was in a good position to run with the horses in the crowd. So, but you don't want to be mentally overloaded. You don't want to leave one trauma going into another trauma without healing. Sometimes we got to heal from grad school before we can go receive what's next. So I'll pass it back over to you, Dr. Hinton.
So speaking of healing, thank you, Dr. Melanie McReynolds. Could you go to the next slide? We're going to take a pause for questions if there are some questions so that we can discuss the next part about how to heal through the process of your tribulations when there's a different phase like classes and so forth. If there's no questions right now, we'll go ahead and transition to the next slide. So it looks like there's not any questions. So the key topic is healing. So it takes a lot to be able to get through courses. And sometimes you realize that you just don't know the things that you thought you knew. You might be really nice in undergrad, might have got a 4.0, but let me tell you, when you get to graduate school, the training wheels come off. The training wheels are no longer there and will never go back on. So you have to learn how to suck it up, realize that you have to study all night, and then sometimes study all morning. And sometimes you have to put things together at the last minute and act like it was together a whole week in advance. I'm telling you, you'll learn these skills. These skills are so important, and they are the key to life, because this is something that will happen over and over again. But if you can learn the skills at a young age, they will stay with you in your proactive thought process, in your champion's mindset, and you'll know how to adapt. That's the beauty of a growth mindset. When you have other things going on, you have to learn how to calm down the storm, be quiet and focus. And remember, that collaboration of community is the key. So like Dr. Shuler and Dr. Melanie McReynolds said it in their own words, you have to not avoid community. The only way that you're going to get through some of these graduate courses is group study, because someone will understand something, you'll understand something that someone else will understand, and you'll go on and say, well, okay, I realized the next slide that I may not be the big fish that I thought I was, but that's okay, because I can still progress and I still can do. And I know that I want a future. So let me go ahead and collaborate. Let me learn that sometimes, man, I might think I'm the big fish, but I really am the small fish. Or I might be the big fish on this one topic, but really I'm not the big fish on all the other topics. So in order to have success, you have to focus and be able to work through things together. A community is a school of fish, as it's called, a school. And so you cannot do things alone. Okay, you have to work in a group. You have to defend from predators. Think about your books, your studies as predators, and they're attacking you, but you have to attack back. You have to learn how to defend. You have to have the right type of text on your test. And the only way to do that is to have the empowerment of knowledge, the empowerment of self, to know your identity, to know your image, and to keep pressing forward when things get tough. But sometimes the healing comes when you're in the community and you do have a little bit of stress, but you can talk to individuals. Next slide. Dr. Melanie McReynolds talks about this very much about the healing process, because you might get through your courses and you might be damaged. So you might need to do counseling, or you may need to have some time management skills or some stress skills. So that comes through career development processes. Dr. Melanie McReynolds, could you talk about what we're talking about here with stress and time management?
Yeah, with stress, sometimes you just have to find out what works best for you. And when you're going to graduate school, you got to know your outlet. You know, are you one of those type of people where you got to go to the gym every day to release your anxieties, to release your fears, to release the troubles of the world? Or are you the type of person who will be downtown with the, with the college nightlife on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to really have that release? Or are you that type of person who's going to find a place of, praise and worship, or, whatever? Or would you just sit by yourself and meditate, or indulge in the reality TV, or just go out for a run? Some people run all their lives to get rid of their stress, but whatever it is for you, if it's going to spiritual places, if it's going out at night, if it's going into the gym, whatever floats your boat, know what makes you happy, know where your peace is. Your peace is not something you can receive, but a place of being. Know how to go and find your peace, know how to release, and know how to renew your strength. And when you understand your stress, understand your triggers, what gives you anxiety, what makes you nervous, what makes you fearful, and be honest with yourself and know that, I'm stressed. I need to realize what I can do and how can I change this. And a lot of times the people in the PhD programs, we are perfectionists or perfected procrastinators. We love to do a good procrastination, but sometimes with some, responsibilities, we may want to not procrastinate. And on the other hand, having too much on your plate causes anxiety, and you need to manage your time and be on top of your Google Calendar and actually be on top of things, because you don't do well with last minute responsibilities. So you really have to be self-aware, and self-awareness and growing and developing who you are is a continuous journey. It's a continuous process. One year you may be very rigid, and the next year you need a defined schedule. Go with the emotions, but be aware of what you need. And when you're aware of what you need, everything else will fall into place. Dr. Hinton.
Thank you, Dr. Melanie McReynolds. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Melanie McReynolds talks about stress and time management, I want to stress to you guys about the point of career development training. A lot of times when you actually take on career development training, it'll allow for you to understand how to organize yourself, how to be productive, and then focus on one thing at a time. Remember, during the first year, your classes are the most important. But one way to manage your laboratory experience and do a good job in your rotations is reading papers and asking questions during seminars, during lab meetings, and then also special seminars that your lab goes to. Or when you're going to outings, having conversation about other people's projects, being involved sometimes on the weekend to make up the hours for the data that you need. So all of these things have to become sacrifices, but managed sacrifices. You have to budget your time, and the best way to budget your time is through counseling and also being able to have advisors to sponsor the knowledge that you're missing from your champion's mindset to get you to where you need. Dr. Shuler, could you take over in the context of stress and time management, then talk about friends dynamics in the context of what we need to have and equip ourselves with during year 1 and year 2?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hinton. Just starting off with Dr. McReynolds has said, because she said a lot on stress management. And I would start with that balance. You need balance between work, academic, your life, and your studies. So how do you do that? For, like Dr. McReynolds has said, it's different for everyone. Some people may need to have a counselor to speak with to deal with their management and stress management. Then others, they can find the solace in whether it be spiritual or going out to exercise. But one thing you don't want to be is in a state of denial that you're not stressed. Oh no, I can handle this, but no, you can't. You're doing sloppy work and you're not realizing it. Or you see with the other people in your lab may see that your attitude is changing, your level of work is changing. So that normally comes because you're stressed or you have been overworked or had taken on too many commitments when you need to let things go. We did a paper not too long ago on the power to say no. Believe it or not, the power to say no allows you to balance that stress because now you have focus. You can focus on the project at hand. You need to know, when COVID set in, we had to start working from home. So I had to set timers on my cell phone to remind myself to get up and move around instead of just sitting at the computer 10 to 12 hours a day. So you can do things of that nature to set timers, to set, to have someone to contact you and say, hey, 2 hours have passed, you need to walk away. You know, then there's that time where you can have a stress talk. Get others involved in your stress management. Your peers are probably having the same type of stress. And as you talk, it also releases that stress. If you don't release the stress, then it can take on not only an effect on your project, but then it begins to affect your health, your mental health. And you will be able to discover, but not sickness on this level. You want to be able to move forward, and you also want to get others involved. Ask for help. And when someone is offering you help, learn how to receive it. Don't think that the person is coming from a negative place, but they see that there is something that has changed that is going to hurt you in the long run. So the last thing I would say on stress and being prepared for that career stage in your life is that you have to know that it's okay not to just ask questions about your study, but ask questions about yourself. A group of friends that I know, we do what we call self-assessment every year. So every year we take this assessment and we share it with each other, and we find out if this is true, if it's not true. It makes you accountable for your actions. And to be accountable for your actions, you have to realize where there's stress, and you have to realize how to get rid of the stress, because if you don't manage the stress, you're going to hinder your growth. Back to you, Dr. Hinton.
Thank you. So next slide, please. So when we're thinking about year one, we will struggle with actually balance. Balance is very important, and it actually will teach us how to have boundaries, to tell our family and friends no. We love to hang out with our friends and our family, like pictures here with Dr. Melanie McReynolds has, and next slide, what I have with my family and my partner. But sometimes your research, your career outweighs sometimes things that are more important at the moment. But if you have true friends and family, they'll help keep you balanced, and they will help you also realize that, you know, there's more than just science, but you have to put your science first, not above everything, because you have to have yourself. And I keep, you know, myself centered around God before everything else, but you have to have a life. You have to say some balance. So maybe 2 weeks out of the month, you pick 2 weekends to work instead of all 4. So then you plan your experiments accordingly, that you work Monday through Friday and you work 2 weekends. So then 2 other weekends, you can have time with your family or your personal relationship or your friends. And then this way, you're actually being able to still remain balanced. And then maybe every 5th week, you take time off to meditate, to relax, to spend time at the lake, to go to counseling, to tell yourself, okay, to have self-reflection, a self-assessment of what you could do better. All these things can be added down not only to your research or your scientific IDP, but you can make a life IDP through a vision board so that you can keep yourself focused and tailored. Next slide, please. We've been talking about the qualifying exam, but we didn't really give you the context of how to actually prepare. So as we transition into the second section, which is talking about funding, the qualifying exam is so important because without qualifying exams, you are not going to be able to tackle the years that are going to happen afterward. You have to be able to persevere. This is your first real challenge of persevering besides your courses. Your qualifying exam, if you have a molecule, let's say estrogen receptor. Okay, how did you learn about this? Where did you hear about it? Cell biology, pharmacology, endocrinology. Okay, so then you should make little maps So you can say estrogen receptor. I learned about it in endocrinology, cell biology, immunology. And then you should say who, what, when, where, and why, and how of each in that particular field. And then you go back and fill everything in. So for example, in cell biology, oh, I learned that estrogen receptors have more than one type. That's the who. Okay, so who are they? You know, okay, what are the types? So now I talk about estrogen receptor alpha, estrogen receptor beta, estrogen membrane receptor, the palmitoylated forms that are membrane receptors that do rapid signaling, and then the ones that are not so known or well established in the field, the GPCRs that are estrogen receptor bound, GRP30 or GPR30. So then you're now asking, well, when does this happen? Okay, there's genomic and there's rapid signaling. Okay, well, where does this happen? Okay, it happens at the membrane, it happens in the cytosol, it happens in the nucleus based upon the event. Well, where? What do you mean by the event? Okay, well, if it's estrogen receptor binding to itself to do genomic work, it goes from cytosol to the nucleus. If it's membrane bound, it stays on the membrane and it changes shape based upon the lipids that are interacting in the lipid raft. Well, why does this happen? Well, one, because it's palmitoylated. Well, which receptors can be palmitoylated? Because that's a new question, right? So that's estrogen receptor beta. All right. And then, well, why does this happen here? Because certain disease states and certain functions require different actions. Well, how does this happen? In cell biology, endocrinology, and immunology. Then you go back up and ask a new question. This is the key of how you study for your qualifying exam with every molecule. And then you go into the next level. Well, to determine your focus, you have all this information. How do you tell a story with it? That's the key thing. You set your outline up then, and you ask, okay, well, what goals am I trying to achieve here? I'm trying to achieve a paper. I'm trying to achieve also individual knowledge so you can write a review. Remember, the more you know, the better you have, because that's another secret. You can write a paper about something. And then how many times should I be studying? You should be studying all the time. You should be thinking about flashcards. You should be thinking about an app that you can have notes on your phone. You should be texting back and forth with somebody else that may have a similar topic in another department, so that you can go back and forth. You should be texting about, well, what other goals does this other person have? Maybe I can help them with a mock qualifying exam, then they can help me. And then maybe you need to bring food to your mock qualifying exam so you can have people come. So it might be a little bit of cost for a little bit of reward, but it's worth the risk. Years 3 through 6, now Dr. Shuler and Dr. Melanie will talk about in the context of the lab, and then also in the field when you may have work to do. Next slide, please. Dr. Melanie McReynolds, will you talk about how the laboratory sucks sometimes and how you need a lab technician to help yourself out? Thanks.
That's if you can afford a lab technician, right? Sometimes you are that lab technician. I mean, for me, we went through a phase where we had 2 to 3 R1s. So by the end of my career, we didn't have any money. And I was the everything in the laboratory until my advisor got back on her feet, which was a quick turnaround. But a lot of us know that mid-stage career between being, you're hot as an assistant to an associate, but from an associate to a professor, it could be a struggle sometimes for PI. So you could get caught in one of them situations. You don't got no lab tech and everything sucks. But anyway, when you just have to know, all you need is 1 or 2 experiments to work. And you feel like it's year 3, it's year 4, time is just wasting, I'm not doing anything. No, it's going to happen. As soon as you get your experiment working, you have your paper. And one way to really navigate when lab is just, that's when you may need to find your balance, find activities. For me, I was president of the Black Graduate Student Association during that time. So a lot of my focus went into more building a community, building my name with the administration at Penn State and putting on various programming efforts, recruitment, DEI work. And I started making my name and my contributions in that field while still slowly but surely progressing through the science and doing what I needed to do. And with those comprehensive exams, you're really building your blueprint of what you want to do. So you have outlined what steps, what questions you're asking, but sometimes you got to be flexible because what you propose will not work. And you really can't, force a square into a circle or a circle into a square. You really just have to, see where the science leads you and be content with that and, have a good, healthy life balance. But also during this time, go to conferences. travel, build your network. You can go to Abercrombs and Sackness and recruit. I guarantee you, every time, you can ask Dr. Hinton, Dr. Shuler, every time we went to one of those conferences, the Institute on Teaching and Mentoring, Sackness, Abercrombs, etc., you come back refreshed, you come back renewed, and you come back with strength. Go to places like ASB&B, ASCB, to our really large meetings. EB conference, you're going to always find the same people you met during your summer internships at various conferences. You're going to start seeing these same faces. So, build connection with your peers, build connections with other PIs, because you want to be thinking about the future. When your lab sucks, it's time to think about what you want to do next. So make those connections, meet potential postdoc advisors, meet potential people in industry, so you can already have that connection. What type of internships can I do? I know I don't want to do research. I'm really passionate about policy. There are some summer opportunities, and Dr. Hinton mentioned earlier, go ahead and have you some data, have your collaboration, and you can show your PI, like, hey, look, I've done X, Y, and Z. This is what's underway. But over the next 2 months, I want to go down to DC and take advantage of this policy internship. But as soon as I get back, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And that's how you can make those years when the lab sucks a little bit better. Dr. Shuler?
Thank you, Dr. McReynolds. That was really great. I would say this is a time where by that 3rd to 6th year, you should have built a network so strong that you have options. So let's say you don't have a lab tech. This is where your creativity and your collaboration should kick in, and you should be able to either go with inside your university or outside your university and find that lab tech, because there's someone else out there that is hungry for information and discovery that's under you. So I would suggest that if you don't have a lab tech because you don't have funding, this is the time that you either go to your PI, to the dean, to your president, or to your provost and say, listen, this is what I want to do. And this is for the school. Always remember, you're going to be a champion and advocate. You're going to speak on how this is going to help the school, put the school out there and brand the school. This is where you can get that lab tech without worrying about funding. You can also go into the community colleges. There are so many students at the community college that is ready and just waiting for someone to invite them into the lab. Maybe the lab may suck at this point, but as Dr. McReynolds and Dr. Hinton has said, this is the time that you probably need to take a step back, collaborate with your peers, connect with someone in a different lab who may be working on a different project, get in that space so they can help you get through that sucking period, because there's so many little maneuvers that you probably overlooking because you're so stressed out because you don't have a lab tech. Your project is not turning out the way it was supposed to. Supplies are coming in late. Someone didn't order supplies, or you find out, okay, the funding was cut across the board. What do you do? This is not the time to bury your head in the sand. This is the time that you get creative. Creative how, Dr. Shuler? Again, collaboration. Collaboration. Never stop collaborating because you haven't made it to the top. Even Nobel Prize winners, they still collaborate. You always are discovering. So this is part of discovery. And I'm gonna stop at this point and turn it over to Dr. Hinton because I can go on this subject for a long time.
So thank you, Dr. McReynolds and Dr. Shuler. So also, this is a place where you could fall through the pipeline. And so what they're saying is that you actually need people to bolster you. So the pipeline is very, very important. And sometimes the lab does suck, but that's okay. And sometimes you actually don't know what you're doing in the lab, but you kind of look like you know what you're doing. You can fake it till you make it, and it might take a year. But if you don't fake it till you're making it, actually go ask for help from a lab technician that may be in your lab or another lab, and befriend them, take them out for coffee, the collaboration piece, the teamwork piece, you can get things done a lot faster. Sometimes you don't need to struggle to learn a technique. Sometimes you need to go out, outsource it even, if you have the finances. And if you don't, go to the lab that knows how to do it, spend some time with the person that does know how to do it. Then that way, A lab experience does not suck, and you're not falling out of the pipeline because you fell out of love with science, because you couldn't solve a problem. Remember, the champion's mindset is also made up of grit and also made up of proactiveness. Next slide. So sometimes, like Dr. Shuler said, it's not okay to do things on your own. You have to have collaboration. One thing that Dr. Melanie McReynolds talked about is finding that network, that community. Well, remember, some technicians think that they know, and really they may not be your friend because they might be telling you wrong because they want to keep their job if funding's getting tight. Well, sometimes you have to reclaim your time with collaboration, and then going to career development seminars so that you can understand the actual articles that we're talking about, such as these, to give you the actual benefit of what to know, what to say, and how to say it. Next slide. And if you know and you're anticipating that just maybe you might be having funding situations, realize that your PI might be saying, like Oprah, you get funding, everybody get funding. Well, that might be good for the moment, but you need to find yourself a T32. You need to find yourself another alternative source or a collaborator's R01 that you can get an NIH supplement to. So there's always other ways to get funding. And then if your PI don't have funding, go to your graduate director. Your graduate director can know who to talk to maybe get you some funding for a year while you come up with a grant. And remember, the grant that you wrote, the reason I told you need to know about estrogen receptors through immunology, cell biology, also endocrinology, is because now you have options on what you can write. You got 3 different proposals that you can hit from the same angle, and you can send one to the AHA, one to the NIH, and then one also to the Aging Foundation. And so you can think about the different ways that estrogen receptors affect all the same process. So you have to think about things in different ways, because funding, next slide, is not about sometimes everybody thinking it's the hot idea. Sometimes it's not going to be the hot ideas, because you say, oh, it's going to get funded. Well, it may not in reality. So that's why you have to have multiple options. That's why we talk about estrogen receptors and we ask everything during the qualifying exam stage, so you know how to write during this period to get you funding. So on the next slide, when you review the presentation, these are some national fellowships that is for everyone to access. Everyone has the opportunity to. There are some minority specific fundings and there are some that are not. So there are opportunities for everyone. Next slide. And then this slide here is also for funding, but for minorities, national diversity funding. And remember, for the NIH supplement, you qualify if you're a woman in certain fields. Also, if you're from rural areas or have had certain hardships that are multiple hardships under the new criteria. So if you would like a link of that, I can send that to you so that you're aware of that, because there's a now broader range for people to be able to come up from diverse backgrounds. The NIH expanded that definition. Next slide. And remember, I haven't forgotten about you all that are international. There are some international fellowships that are available. They may be far and few in between, but that's okay. We're here for you. So you have all 3 types. So when you review the presentation, you're able to find those. Questions part 3 is the next slide, please. And since no one has questions, we'll go on to part 4, which is the nuts and bolts of how to get into graduate school. So next slide. I think it's very important as we continue to wrap up and transition into the later part of the talk. We won't have, of course, all the time, because I prepare extra slides for study material, because I believe in teaching. So I believe you have to review the presentation over and over again to get everything that you need out of it. But while you have us, remember that you want to break down things in an IDP plan. While you're in undergrad, think of everything that you're doing as the landscape for an IDP plan. The NIH, NSF are pushing this big IDP plan. So what is it? An individual development plan. Why do you need it? So that you can categorize your experiences and expectations to meet your goal. What can you do with an IDP plan? Change your life, strengthen your lesser strengths, overcome things that you just know that are not lesser strengths, and improve upon your strengths. And who needs this? Everyone needs it. You need it, I need it, we need it, all of us need it. So now I'm sounding like Oprah. Next slide. So in the individual development plan, there's different levels to it. So sometimes you have to break it down into undergrad and thinking about what you can do to get there. So sometimes you have to reinvent the wheel of how you think. Remember, a champion's mindset is knowing who you are. So I suggest you take a personality test, the Big 5 personality test or the Myers-Briggs personality test, to know who you are. For example, I'm an NFAG. NFJ, and I'm like Obama or Oprah or Pete Sampras, and I love that because those people I can identify with. And so my important values are family, finances, security, and learning, and important traits to imbue others with enthusiasm, always wanting to see other people succeed in their potential. So these are things that I embody. And then also you should think about assessments for love languages, because you now need to tell your mentors how to love you, whether it's through a word of affirmation, you did a great job, whether it's an acts of service, let's go over this grant together, or whether it's receiving a gift. Well, you know, I think that you can end lab early today because I've been seeing you work hard, or whether it's quality time where you need to spend time with your collaborators to be able to really know, or because we're in professional industry, a high five for physical touch. Okay, so next slide. So sometimes the IDP plan gets down to the intricate details of also how you learn. So remember, you have to observe and ask, how do you learn the best? Sometimes it's more than one set of skills that leads to the most appropriate learning style to know how to study. So if you're making an IDP plan of how to study now, you'll know how to translate it to when you're going to graduate school, what works for you and what doesn't. And then still keeping an open mindset of exploring the other options. Because sometimes the options that worked at the undergraduate level don't work for the graduate level of training. Next slide. So we keep beating around the clock about career development. Career development is so very important, and it's the key to making sure that you do well. If you know about career development, you can know about internships because you can ask about them. And if you don't know, you can go to your career development office or your graduate office or postdoc office that may be at the same institution as you prepare for these things, and you can find out and explore, or you can just come to the National Research Mentor Network and we can do some more seminars to discuss some of these other intricate details. Or other people may have the same idea and do that as well. Also, we're telling you about networking and collaboration. Well, sometimes you have to go out on ResearchGate and LinkedIn for yourself to explore the options that could be out there. Also, you need to join clubs that are in your undergraduates, like your honor society or your campus organizations, or even your sorority, because it gives you access to a new network of people that may know something that you don't know. I also challenge each of you to make business cards. Business cards at this level can be seen as, wow, he, she, or they are really working it. They really know what they're doing, okay? And then also make sure that you spend time learning how to teach, learning how to tutor, because it will benefit you in graduate school. Because sometimes you may not have funding, but you know how to be a teacher assistant because you learned it in undergrad. So mark that on an experience so that you know how to pay for yourself. Because sometimes your PI may not have funding for a research assistantship, but you can go teach and you can make sure that you get everything done. All right. And then secondly, an IDP plan lists your short-term and your long-term goals. So if you're an undergrad, maybe your undergraduate goals are to finish undergraduate school, win an award, go to a presentation, and do really well at the poster competition at Abercams or SACNES, or maybe the Institute of Learning and Teaching, or the National Undergraduate Research Conference. And then long-term aspirations, you want to get into grad school, medical school, or professional school, or find a job directly after it, because maybe you want to help people in the healthcare field and you want to be a tech that specializes somewhere in industry from the skills that you learn from your internships at each summer at the undergraduate level that also could benefit you for graduate studies. Next slide. Remember, the individual development plan is all about your strengths and your weaknesses. You have to learn how to be strong. When I was an undergrad, these were my strengths: literature research skills, poster skills, oral presentation skills, teaching, work ethic, and generating questions. Now the other slide. Now this was my bad stuff. I called it my lesser strengths because I was always coining myself that I was going to be proactive. So sometimes you got to say, I'm going to be proactive. So in undergrad, these were my lesser strengths that I worked on: becoming a better organizer, improving my grant writing, create a strong publication record. I also thought about, well, if I couldn't get a strong publication record, maybe I could get junior publications. So publishing in some educational journals that allow for undergraduates to submit some data, and then going to meetings and meeting deadlines, and then also improving on my experimental technique and improving my research effectiveness. Next slide. So when you're an undergraduate, you have to think about all of these things. And as we transition to the last section, you have to be aware that undergraduate level does involve you learning a skill set of research. You should really dive deep into the research to know every skill you possibly can. The basic molecular skills, such as DNA extraction, protein extraction, RNA extraction, will benefit you in every single field. knowing how and why you do these things and the components of how to get them from isolation to running on a block and identifying certain part of it is so important. And lastly, you make it rain. Undergraduate school, is a colloquialism that we like to say, making it rain is giving money. So sometimes you go to these undergraduate institutions, save your money during the summertime. When you get to this undergraduate institution, they may give you $5,000 plus living expenses. Do not spend your $5,000. I know you want to spend some, so maybe spend 1,000 of it, but keep 4,000 for your college applications, because every application may not be free. That's another key nugget for you guys. Or every medical school application may not be free. So now you have finances to pay for it, and you don't have to ask your parents or have to work to create hardship for yourself when you already have it. So your undergraduate summer experiences are a way for you to save money, also for you to get experience and to eventually get to where you want to do things in the future. And make sure you win as many awards as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with taking in more money, because at the end of the day, you need currency to be able to power yourself through the channels that you need to go. And most importantly, get good grades so you can be on the deans and chancellors list. And then this way, these things matter, because during the first year, when you're applying for graduate fellowships, you can apply to some on your own. You just need letters from your previous mentors in undergrad. And because you did so well with your grades, they award it to you, such as an NSF fellowship. Next slide. So if no one has questions, we'll go on to the last part. This is the key part of the talk. This is actually getting into what you need to know and how to actually get to graduate school. So I'll do a couple of slides, and then we'll focus on the personal statement, which Dr. Shuler will talk about and Dr. Melanie McReynolds will talk about. And then we'll talk about some letters of recommendation, and then also the questions that come up and how to answer maybe a few of them as we close, because we're getting closer to time. So I just want to quickly say that the GRE is no longer required. If you want to take it, go ahead. But if you don't, try to look up all the schools that are not required, that don't require the GRE. Next slide. And remember, there are other ways to replace your GPA. You do not need to take subject tests. Subject tests are sometimes a thing of the past. But if a school requires it, go ahead and take it. Don't try to avoid it. Study for it and do a subject that you're really good at, maybe biochemistry or biology. You need to also be able to find out which schools do require GREs. Maybe some of the Ivy League schools still require GRE, or some of the harder private schools to get into require GRE, and that's okay. So how do you study for it? Go back to the previous slide, please. You study for it by making sure you take the time to give you what you need at a certain level. So if your GPA is lower and it's less than 3.0, you're going to need a high GRE score. If you don't want to take a GRE score right away, then try to do a master's or a postbac program. Then increase your performance so then your GRE score can match some of your new GPA. And then sometimes if you retake a course during your postbac, you may not have to take your GRE subject test to prove that you know that material. So it's all about give and take. Next slide, then next slide after that. So after you have studied some, you actually have to practice. So getting a manual and practicing the GRE is important. You have quantitative, you actually have also your verbal, and you have your writing section. So be able to practice. You can find some of this word list to study during the Barron's list, which is published online if you don't have access to a GRE book. And you can find some of the older tests online that you can practice that are free. Next slide. And an example questions look like this that I won't go over for lack of time, but you'll be able to understand that there are different types of math questions, different types of verbal questions, and you have to be able to know all of them, because nothing is superfluous when coming to the GRE. You have to find the pith of each argument, but you also have to be able to expand on it. Remember that everything that you teach yourself is a didactic lecture. There's nothing that's not important. So remember, the veracity of every argument comes in the knowledge that you know that's based on fact. So what I was trying to do there was to let you know that you have to study, have to apply the word that you're using, and know how to use them in the right context. Next slide. So when you're learning how to use the words, you have to also write a personal statement. Dr. Shuler, could you talk about the personal statement just in general? I also wanted to say just really quickly that the personal statement is broken down for you guys to review, so you can actually look at the slides. Dr. Shuler is just going to talk about personal statements and what should be included. But when you go back, you can actually you can go slide by slide to actually look at someone's personal statement that was rated one of the highest personal statements that Baylor ever had, because it was so clear, so lucid, and it was so well put together. So I give you some little nuggets that you can take home with and review these PowerPoints in more detail. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Shuler.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hinton. And I'm going to be brief, look like we have 1 minute left. So as he said, your personal statement is your story, it's your narrative. It's a narrative that will highlight why you are in the field that you are in. You don't want to go back and start from when I was a little girl. My grandmother told me this, and my mom always told me I was going to be a doctor. And you never want to use the word, I really want to help people. Because when students tell me that, I say, well, people at Walmart want to help people. People who clean the street want to help people. So this is the time where you really shine your light onto why am I studying in the field that I'm studying in? Why am I pursuing my PhD? What brought me up to this level? And I usually ask students to start jotting down little nuggets during their undergraduate year, during their freshman year. What has piqued your interest? Tell me about how you maneuvered through this hardship and brought you around the corner to where you are in this research lab today. Tell me a little bit about your struggles, but I want to hear how you overcame those struggles. And I also want to see what are your future goals. Where do you get your future goals? From that IDP plan. So you can actually write your personal statement using your IDP plan. If you don't have an IDP plan, then you need to really sit down and reflect and think about the people who've made contributions into your life, why you're where you are now. You can also still talk about your struggles, how you overcame your struggles, and you want to say something about what you're planning to do in the future. That personal statement should be in alignment with some goals, some values, the mission statement of the school that you're applying to. So every time you apply, you might have to tweak your personal statement. And that's all I'm going to say at this time. Back to you, Dr. Hinton.
Thank you. So next slide. So each one of these slides, as you go back and review the PowerPoint, will give you what you need for the personal statement. Next slide. It will teach you how to address your deficiencies, how to write about it in detail, how to talk about addressing a lower GRE score, what you did to overcome that. Next slide. And then also talking about how your research was impactful, what you did during that experience, why you think you're ready for a PhD program. Next slide. And then interview questions. Dr. Melanie McReynolds will start to end with interview questions, and then I'll do a quick summary of the letter of recommendation, and then we'll be done for today. And remember that these questions are also able for you to review, for you to zoom in on when you're looking at this in replay on YouTube, so that you can go in more detail about the interview process. Go ahead, Dr. Melanie.
The interview process is so important. It's the time for you to get to know faculty members and for faculty members to get to know you. It's the time for the admission committee to really have a sense of who you are and for you to have a sense of who the committee is as well. It's the time for the institution to get to know you and for you to get to know the institution. So I really took this part serious. And before my graduate interviews, I went through all of these type of questions. So you will find interview questions online. You will have it in this talk. Take those questions, make them specific to you, and look at the people you're meeting with. Have specific questions for each person. Have the general questions for the students, for the faculty members, and also be ready to answer a few questions. You never want idle time during your interview. And if you're proactive and if you're leading the conversation, they're going to think that you're just as much as interested in this program as they are interested in having you there. And when all else fails, always ask the person you're meeting with about their science. Scientists love to talk about their science, but get a good sense of, what are the expectations of this program? What are the dynamics? What should I expect? What do you expect of me? What are you doing? Where's your science going? What is your vision for the future? Ask those questions that show you're a visionary, that show you're quick on your feet and show that you're intentional and you're taking this serious. And we'll let Dr. Hinton in with the letter of recommendations.
So one quick point to tie it all together, make a notebook of your personal statement, your IDP plan, your transcripts, and also potential templates that were the first initial draft for your letters of recommendation. So you have all that material ready at your fingertips for every place that you're going, and make a separate notebook of questions per place you're actually interviewing. And then also print out the picture and the abstract of the person that you're meeting with, go over their research so you can have questions like she said, and then also be able to have specific questions that are tailored to them, and general questions that talk about the demographics of the institution, what's unique about the institution. Next slide, please. And as you go through the interview questions, we tell you about the do's and don'ts of interview questions, what to do, how they're split up into what professors will ask, like personal characteristics, academic performance. So make sure you know your internships. Next slide, your future goals, what you lack, things that you could do better. And then they also tell you about questions in general that we want you to ask that are specific maybe to diversity, or more unique sets of questions that they may not anticipate you asking that are very good, that'll give you high points on your interview. Next slide. And then this particular slide is very important because it tells you how to follow up. So you always want to follow up when you give interview questions. You want to write a personal thank you in an email or a handwritten note to say, thank you for this opportunity. I hope to follow back up with you. It tells you how to address them in the actual letter too. And lastly, the letter of recommendation as we end. The letter of recommendation is the key, the backbone that will get you in the interview when you have grades that may not be strong, or strong grades and a strong GRE, but your personality sucks because you're always nervous during the interview. But a letter of recommendation will tell how charismatic you are, how open you are, how you're able to shine before everyone else is able to actually identify it in you. So sometimes a letter of recommendation will be your biggest sponsor when you're not able to be a sponsor for yourself. So remember, a letter of recommendation should be done in a fashion that's strong, written well, and someone that's not going to talk about gender imbalance or personal information. So be careful what you tell mentors. Make sure that a mentor can work with you to craft a letter. And also make sure that you have confidence that the mentor can write you a strong, well-written, and highly qualified strong letter of recommendation, okay? I think that's what a strong letter means. I said those words so you know what a strong letter is, because it's very important, because people can say, I can write you a letter, but is it a good one? Is it a strong one? Is it a great one? Or is it just a lukewarm one? So with this, we'll have questions and comments, and we just want to say thank you for this time today. Remember, your IDP plan is the most important fun fact we can tell you to organize yourself during undergrad. And remember that the letter of recommendation, your personality, and your personal statement and your research are all important. But above all, have fun during this process. And remember, the extra supplemental support that we gave you in the chat is something that you can embody and take to heart so that you can be able to balance yourself so that you don't burn out or fall out of the pipeline. We thank you for your time today. We thank you for actually wanting to hear us and what we have to say about the trials and tribulations of graduate school. And we hope that this has made an impact in your life, how it has an impact in our life, and sharing it with you. Thank you for this time.
Thank you all so much for providing all of this information and sharing all of this. I really appreciate you all taking your time to do this. For everyone still on the call, we are going to be posting this to our YouTube channel as well as to the NRMN Career Development website. So again, thank you all for your time, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.